Have you ever wondered if a 2x group set or a 1x group set is faster? In this video, we're going to break down the differences between a 2x group set and a 1x group set and explain why the more traditional 2x is likely faster than the newer 1x group set for most athletes. Before we discuss the differences between the two group sets, it's important to understand a study conducted by Jim Martin several years ago. So, if we hold the output power of the athlete consistent, but we change the cadence and we change the crank length. So, cadence is how fast your legs are spinning, and the crank length is going to be this length right here. The output for the cyclist, so how much energy the athlete is putting out, is going to remain the same. So even if I'm spinning at 80 cadence, so 80 RPM, or I move up to 100 RPM, my output is going to be roughly the same. Now, this is based on two things. The first one is something called the cost of unloaded cycling. What that means is you can think of sitting on a bike or trainer and spinning your legs and the chain is not connected. If I'm spinning at 40 RPM, then it's going to be relatively easy. If I then spin my legs at 100 RPM, then everybody knows intuitively that your heart rate is going to go up. So the output for the cyclist is going to be higher because they're spinning their legs faster. The other thing is called the metabolic cost of the athlete. So as you increase your cadence, it becomes more efficient for you to produce the same amount of power. So you have two things going on. You have, as your cadence increases, you have the cost of unloaded cycling increasing, and you have the cost of metabolic cost of the athlete decreasing. So as those two are moving in the same direction, regardless of where your cadence is, and you maintain that same power, it's about the same output. In the same study, they used 9 athletes, and these 9 athletes were trained cyclists. And so trained cyclists tend to move towards 100 cadence, 100 RPM, and that's kind of what naturally they go to when they're trained. One of the main reasons for this, based on some other research that Jim and another colleague did, is based on something called weave frequency. It's a big fancy term, but basically it helps an athlete stay up and stay balanced regardless of what they need to do. If they need to sprint or they need to slow down, the bike wants to remain stable based on that weave frequency and the 100 RPM. This is a 2x group set. The main reason it's called a 2x group set is because it has 2 chain rings up front on the crank. You're also going to notice that the gears in the back, the cassette, has smaller gears and they have closer gear ratios. Because you have 2 rings up front and 12 gears in the back, you have a total of 24 gear options for a 2x group set. This is a 1x group set. The reason it's known as a 1x group set is because the crank only has 1 chain ring. What you're going to notice on the cassette is that the gears are larger in diameter, which means that the gear ratios are spaced further apart. Because you have 1 ring up front and 12 gears in the back, this gives you 12 gear options for the 1x group set. Let's look at the impact of choosing a 2x group set versus a 1x group set. Even though the gear ratio range on the 2x and 1x group sets are roughly the same, because the 1x drivetrain only has 12 gears, it means the jumps between gear ratios are much larger. And this is something that likely causes the athlete to be slower. Let's look at why. This is a graph of all the gear ratios for a 2x group set. You can see here that the ratios are close together. Here's a graph for the 1x group set. You can see how much further apart the gear ratios are for the 1x group set. Here's where it gets interesting. Let's think about why you want to shift as a cyclist. Let's say your natural cadence is 100 RPM and things start to get easier, so your cadence rises up to 106. At that point, you may want to downshift to make things harder. And the same goes for if you're going uphill and things get more challenging, maybe your cadence drops to around 94 and you want to shift to make things easier to get yourself back up to that 100 RPM. Let's say we're pedaling at 100 RPM and we shift up or down. With a calculation in the gear ratios, we can calculate the new cadence if we hold the power the same. This graph shows that as you shift up or down on a 2x group set, the cadence changes are small. The average is about 6 RPM. Since the body is wanting to adjust near that 6 RPM cadence change, this gets you back to your normal cadence when you shift. For a 1x group set, you can see that the cadence changes are much larger. On average, each shift will change your cadence by about 13 RPM with a peak of 17 RPM. This means that if you move up to 106 and shift, you could end up at an 89 RPM, which is further away than when you started. This can cause a feeling of being in between gears, and for most is pretty uncomfortable. I originally started thinking about this problem years ago when I went from a 10-speed cassette to an 11-speed cassette. When I was on the 10-speed, I always felt like there was a gear that was missing at certain cadences. I couldn't quite get comfortable. As soon as I went to 11-speed, everything felt a lot smoother because the gears were closer and it just felt like I could shift easily. Jim and I have talked about this at length, and this is our opinion. You think about an athlete, and what they want in a race is to have the expected happening at all times. In order to keep your metabolic costs low, you don't want anything that shocks the system or increases stress levels. So if you're expecting a shift to move you back to your normal, you want that shift to bring you back to your normal. If you start shifting and you're outside of your expected range, then the body has to adjust to a drastic change. It also increases the stress in the body because of the unexpected. You're fumbling between gears. This increases the metabolic cost, which overall is going to make you slower as an athlete. So we believe a 2x group set is going to be faster for most athletes. The smoothness between gears, the predictability, and the lower metabolic cost is going to help you shave some watts and give you an improved time. If you want to listen to the full discussion between myself and Jim Martin, you can check out our podcast link below here. And if you want to see some more of these charts and graphs, be sure to check out our blog with the link also below. Hope you enjoyed this video, and let us know if you have any comments.